Hey, my name is Alec Wenzel, and today I'm talking to you about a pedal that you've probably seen everywhere. It is the HX Stomp from Line 6. I picked this up back in May because I needed a solution for a direct to front of house rig, and this is what I went with. I had begun working with a company that required silent stages, and that means that you can't have an amplifier on stage with you, and you need to be running an amplifier simulator like this one. I went with the HX Stomp because it seemed a little bit more robust, and I was hoping to run some other effects in it for those shows. But what we're going to talk about is like how I felt about the experience, what I felt it sounded like, what the settings I used were, how I had wired it into a small pedal board for those events, and we're also going to talk about what some of the challenges were with it. But before we get into all of that, I made a short jam video so you could hear some of the sounds that I was working with and what I was kind of going for with this pedal. All of the tracks were recorded with the HX Stomp on my small event board, including the bass track, and I'll show you all those settings too as we sort of go through the video. But I'll see you on the other side of that, and we can start talking about all the stuff that comes with running the HX Stomp direct. Hey, Alec here. Just a quick interjection. If you like what you're seeing, you enjoyed the jam, or you're still watching the video in any capacity, please like and subscribe. It's free to you, and it really, really helps me out. Thank you so much, and let's get back to some more thoughts on this pedal. So now that you've heard kind of what it sounds like, let's talk about how I felt about running direct. Now, I'm going to be honest here, I would never choose to run direct. You lose the ability to mix to yourself on stage, you lose touch sensitivity, you lose a lot of control over your own tone. But that being said, like, that's not necessarily a priority when you're playing an event gig, when you're just trying to make people dance, right? It's a lot of funk riffs and then the iconic solos that you have to play when that stuff comes up. So, touch sensitivity and mixing to yourself on stage isn't necessarily the priority. And as long as you can hear yourself clearly and you know what you're playing, that's really all you need. And for that, I think it did a great job. I was able to get a good, clean platform that allowed me to kind of do all of that stuff. Also, the convenience and versatility of this thing can't be overstated. I can't tell you how nice it felt to just sort of walk in, set my pedal board down on stage, and then plug in and kind of be done. The other thing that it was really good for is when you need to switch between rigs really quickly. I also do acoustic ceremony stuff, and this has great just built-in acoustic settings. I didn't have to build my own rig kind of the way that I did with the Princeton. I was able to just use a preset and get pretty immediate, beautiful acoustic sounds. So overall, wouldn't pick it over an amplifier, but given the setting and what I needed it to do, it was a great tool for that. So with all of that being said, it might sound like I'm down on the HX Stomp a little bit, but just because I have criticisms of something doesn't mean that I don't think it can be an awesome tool or have great use cases. There's pros and cons to everything. And one of those pros that I want to get into is accessibility. This thing has great immediate settings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the camera around so we can face the pedal and talk about some of those settings. We're going to look at the sort of setting I was using for those event gigs. We're going to look at the acoustic setting I was using, and then we're going to put it right back on the mini board that I had built so we can look at what it looks like wired up for those shows that I was playing, and then also look at what the settings were like for that intro jam that you saw a little bit earlier, if you liked some of those sounds. So as I was saying, one of the positives about the HX Stomp is its accessibility. And what I mean by that is its ability to immediately get you a great sound. This was one of the first ones that I looked at. This was good old rock, and I actually liked this one so much that I modified it a little bit by adding these ins and outs so I could loop in a delay over here. We'll get to what that looks like a little bit later. But I was able to use this on a gig pretty immediately. It's a distortion, a harmonic trem, and a univibe. Those are all just great easy rock sounds that sound good right out the gate. There's also really amazing direct sounds, right? It's got this whole section that it calls effects, which is where it's just functioning as a pedal board. And then we get into direct, right? So California rectifier, right? We've got like a jazz sound, like jazz. This is meant to sort of emulate a jazz chorus. You can see that from the 70s chorus, right? A little bit of bucket brigade delay. And so, yeah, it's just got all these, a matchless clone, right? It's got all of these great direct sounds, and you can really just take this in and get everything from like, this is a doom sound kind of, right? We have dynamic ambience, this Minotaur type fuzz, and then a simple delay, right? So you can get everything from just like a regular rock sound to like an ambient sound to heavy metal sounds, and they're just all set up direct right here, right? So could set this on the floor, plug it into the sound system direct out of the out on the top, then turn my volume up to taste, and then all of a sudden you've got a rig you can play with. I'm not much of a menu diver, so that kind of thing really, really appeals to me. I would use the acoustic songwriter settings all the time, right? I can switch this out of rock mode and put this into an acoustic songwriter mode. This one's great because it's got a nice plate reverb right there. It makes things sound really airy and beautiful. So now let's look at the setting I built for myself. I wanted to do this really quickly just before I put it back on the board, and we have to zoom out a little bit. But I built for myself, like I said, a like clean Princeton style emulation. I've got a like distortion pedal right up front here in this block. The next block then becomes the amplifier. That's the amplifier there. Then I've got a gain module, because sometimes you just need to be a little bit louder. Just functions the same way a clean boost would. Then we have these FX in and out loops here, because on the right side I was putting a delay in there that I like. And then we have the cab, right? So you want your delay to happen after the head and before the cab. And then we've just got a general reverb, just a plate reverb all the way at the end. And the reason it's built this way is because when you play like an event gig or a rock gig, all you really need is ambience, distortion, and, you know, that's basically it. You can augment with like a chorus, and I'll show you how I did that here in a second. So let's switch over to what the full board wiring looks like. So this is the whole wedding board wired up, and I have to say it is ugly. One of the challenges I ran into was trying to make signal flow work in a more traditional way. I've got a video on how to wire a pedal board so that you are going distortion into modulation into ambient effects, right? And I'll link that video down below, but it basically explains this concept that for the cleanest signal flow, the most traditional signal flow, that's how you want to do it. You want to go distortion into modulation into ambient effects. But what the problem was is that because I needed this to be an amplifier and gain and distortion, and I needed another distortion and a modulation device, that meant that I had to run distortion and modulation and then into the front of the, like, this is our amplifier, right? Into the front of the amplifier. And then I had to use these, you know, FX blocks that represent signal flow to then wire my delay in later than all of this stuff using the effects loops in and outs on the side here. And it just led to like a lot of board clutter. It's really messy. It's hard to take out and move around. You can't pull the pedal board out like really quickly or easily. And so, yeah, that was just one of the challenges I faced. You know, there are solutions to this that I could look at. One of those is just building a slightly larger board so that I can have access to more things and I don't have to wire it in this really weird way. The other option is that I could make some of these buttons the ambience and put them later, and then just have another distortion pedal here and have those both going into the front there. So there are solutions to this, but these are the pedals that I really wanted to use for this gig. They're the most kind of versatile and the ones that I'm really used to, which is important on a gig where things can change a lot. But yeah, that was definitely a challenge that I faced. It was something that was a little bit difficult. So one of the other issues with trying to use this board is powering it. You can't wire the HX Stomp into a normal pedal power supply. It's an effects processor, right? This is more like a computer than it is like a guitar pedal. And so it's got to have its own wall wart power supply coming out of the front of it. This leads to a lot of cable mess on stage, and you always run the risk of, the bass player moving around and kicking this out because it's not in a super tight outlet, because these event companies have used their power strips a million times, and then all of your sound is dead. There are kind of solutions to this, and one of them is a power supply that Walrus Audio recently came out with that has an out for specifically powering stuff like the HX Stomp. It would also power like the other HX line effects, and it could also power like a quad cortex, right? And I think it's important to make the switch to one of those if you want to use this long term. I've still been using this setup and I haven't had any problems, but if I continue to go with this small board here, wiring it that way is definitely going to be a top priority. Getting a power supply that can power both these pedals and this pedal rather than having to have two separate power supplies is something that I'm going to look at and would recommend if you intend to be using this as a long-term solution and need other pedals in addition to the HX Stomp. And so my third and final small complaint, and this isn't so much of a complaint as it is a caveat, right? Like a buyer beware. And that's that the HX Stomp sounds brighter in an in-ear mix than it does coming through the house or a large speaker. And that's true of the headphone jack too. I had done some practicing on the road and had plugged into the headphone jack, and it didn't feel like the, headphone out tone that I was getting was representative of what I was hearing live. And it's just to remember that what you're hearing is not necessarily what the crowd is hearing. I think the HX Stomp sounds really great when I run it through my studio monitors. I think it sounds awesome when I run it through like a powered speaker, but when I was hearing it in my in-ears, it came across as kind of harsh. And I'd asked the sound guy about it multiple times, and he had said, I'm not getting that on my end. I've actually, added some higher frequencies back in with an EQ. But if that's what you're hearing, that's not what they're hearing out there. So yeah, just being aware that what you're getting in your in-ears is not always the same as what would come out of, a larger speaker or running direct into your home recording device. But with that being said, let's flip the camera back up and we'll look at some of the sounds that I was using for that intro jam that we had played a little bit earlier. All right, so let's look at the sounds that I was using in that sort of intro jam video. The first thing that you hear is 4 measures of rhythm up front, and that is just the HX Stomp. That is just an example of the Princeton emulation with a dynamic plate reverb at the end. That's just my basic rhythm tone. When you hear the clean lead come in, I add in the Strymon El Capistan. That is a tape delay, and adding a little bit of delay to your clean lines really gives them a little bit more body and ambience, and I really like that when I'm playing a clean lead. And then finally, when you hear the Strat come in, I introduce the Pettyjohn and the Hedgehog D9, which is a Maxon sonic distortion emulation from HX Stomp, and I think these two sound really good together. That's kind of like my fuzzy lead sound for when I'm playing live. And so yeah, those were all the guitar tracks that you heard, right? Clean rhythm with nothing on, lead with some ambience from the Strymon tape delay, and then we have that sort of fuzz sound from the Pettyjohn chime and the Hedgehog D9 sonic distortion emulation in the HX Stomp. And then finally, the bass track was also recorded with the HX Stomp, and it's an example of me kind of loving that ability to pull up sounds really quickly, that accessibility I was talking about earlier. And what I did was I just flipped through the direct bass options, and I came upon Agua Sludge, and it had this auto filter that I really liked. So the bass has an auto filter on it, and I thought it sounded really good just sort of beneath clean jazz chords. I was having a lot of fun with it. And so yeah, this thing is great when you just need a good sound fast, something that's easy, and you can find a lot of inspiration in those just other preset direct sounds that they have sitting around. It can inform what you want to build for yourself, and it can just give you some quick access to, something that would sound great in a mix without having to work that hard. So some closing thoughts that I have after gigging with the HX Stomp all summer is that it's kind of a jack of all trades, master of none situation. And what that means is that it's great at a lot of different things, but if you're always comparing it to your favorite best available option, then you're going to be disappointed, right? If I'm comparing the HX Stomp to my real amplifiers, I'm not going to be as happy. If I'm comparing it to, like my personal hand-built pedal board with all of my favorite pedal options on there, then I'm going to be disappointed. But if I'm looking at it like it's got the necessities that I need and it gives me access to a lot of great sounds with a lot of immediacy, then I think you're going to be really happy. And I definitely was. I thought it sounded great through, the sound systems that I was playing through. And I thought the customization in allowing me to wire things in a way that I liked and felt good to me were important details that, get overlooked when you're, kind of comparing it to larger rigs. The other benefit I think that the HX Stomp has is that it belongs in everybody's hands. It belongs in the casual jammer's hands as much as it does the professionals, right? If you're a casual player and you're looking for an option to bring a small pedal board over to a friend's house to jam with them, it's great because you can plug it direct into a powered speaker if they don't have an extra amplifier. Or if you brought your own amp and they also have an amp, then you have an immediate small pedal board with a lot of great sounds on it too. So I think the HX Stomp is a pedal for everybody. It's super versatile, and any of the, cons or negatives that I felt that it had were far outweighed by those benefits. And with that brings us to the end of this video. If you stuck around the whole time, thank you so much for watching. It means a lot. Watch time is the most important thing in the YouTube algorithm, and I really appreciate it. Again, my name is Alec Wenzel. If you liked what you saw and heard, please like and subscribe. It's free to you. It really, really helps me out, and it gives me momentum going forward to be able to make more videos like this. Thank you so much again for watching, and I hope to see you guys on my next video. Thank you so much. Bye.